The engine of my truck gave one last rattling cough before falling silent. The sudden absence of sound was violent. It felt like a physical blow to my chest. I sat there for a long moment, my hands still gripped tight around the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, drained of blood, and I could feel the faint, rhythmic throb of my pulse against the cold plastic. Outside, Blackwood waited. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of dry dust and something old, something like ozone before a storm. My throat felt tight, constricted. I forced myself to open the door. The hinge let out a long, metallic shriek that echoed across the empty town square, sounding less like metal and more like a dying animal. I flinched. My heart was already racing, a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. I stepped onto the cracked asphalt. The heat of the Wyoming sun should have been blistering, but as I stood there, a sudden chill raced down my spine, raising goosebumps on my damp skin. I wiped my palms on my jeans. They were slick with a cold, nervous sweat. I wasn't just an engineer today. I felt like an intruder in a tomb. I moved to the back of the truck to unload my gear. My movements were clumsy, my fingers fumbling with the latches of the Pelican cases. My breath was coming in short, shallow hitches. "Get a grip, Thomas," I whispered to myself. My own voice sounded thin, alien, as if the heavy silence of Blackwood was trying to swallow the words before they could leave my lips. I carried my Marantz recorder toward the ruins of the stone church. With every step, the silence seemed to thicken. It wasn't just a lack of noise. It was a pressure in my inner ear, the kind you feel when a plane begins a rapid descent. I reached the church, and a smell hit me. A cloying, sweet scent of rot, mixed with a sharp tang of wet copper. My eyes landed on the pile of stones in the center of the nave. Beneath them, a perfect circular lip of dark rock peeked through the debris. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through deep mud as I approached it. I knelt down, the sharp grit of the floor biting into my knees. I cleared the first stone. My fingers brushed against the rim of the well, and I gasped. It wasn't cold. It was vibrating, a faint, subsonic hum that traveled up my arm, through my elbow, and settled deep in my teeth. I looked down into the opening. The darkness inside wasn't just an absence of light. It was a solid thing, a velvet, hungry void. I leaned over, my hair falling forward, and for a terrifying second, I felt a sensation of being pulled, not by gravity, but by an urge, a sickening, magnetic desire to just let go. I squeezed my eyes shut, my head spinning with a sudden wave of vertigo. I reached for an iron bolt in my pocket, my fingers trembling so much I almost dropped it. I held it over the black mouth of the well. My hand hovered there for what felt like an eternity. A single drop of sweat rolled from my forehead, hung for a second on the tip of my nose, and then fell into the abyss. I didn't hear it hit. I let the bolt go. I counted. 1, 2, 3. By the time I reached 20, my breath was a jagged mess in my throat. Nothing. No sound returned. The well didn't just swallow objects. It seemed to be swallowing time itself. I stood over that void, and my lungs felt like they were filling with wet concrete. Every breath was a manual labor, a conscious effort to keep the oxygen moving. I pulled my headphones from my bag, my fingers so slick with nervous sweat that the cord kept slithering out of my grip like a live wire. When I finally clamped them over my ears, the sound of my own blood thundering in my temples felt like the roar of a distant ocean. I lowered the hydrophone. The cable snaked into the dark. 50 feet, 100, 300. I could feel the vibration of the wire traveling through my fingertips, vibrating the very bones of my skull. Suddenly, the reel in my hands jerked. It didn't hit bottom. Something down there, something soft, had caught the line. My stomach did a violent flip, and that sharp, nauseating taste of old copper flooded my mouth. I held my breath, and in that vacuum of sound, I heard it. Through the white noise of the headphones came a sound that shouldn't exist in a dry well. It was the sound of something swallowing. A slow, wet, rhythmic gulping, as if a massive throat was struggling to push down something too large. A chill spiked through me, so violent my teeth actually clicked together. I wanted to yank my hands away, but my muscles were locked. I watched the hair on my forearm stand straight up, my skin erupting in 1,000 tiny goosebumps. I felt the air behind me grow thick, heavy, as if an invisible presence was leaning over my shoulder, inhaling the scent of my fear. I spun around, my heart doing a painful somersault in my chest. Nothing, just the empty church and dust motes, dancing in the dying light. But when I looked back at the floor, I saw it. The grass near the well, it had turned pitch black. I dropped to my knees, my ragged breathing echoing off the stone walls. I reached out a trembling hand and touched that grass. It was warm, it was oily, and it flinched. Thousands of microscopic fibers shivered simultaneously under my touch. It wasn't a plant. It was human hair, growing thick and coarse directly out of the stone. The static in my headphones flared into a shriek, and then I heard my own voice, but the cadence was wrong. Fingers trembling, copper in the mouth. The voice whispered. Those were my thoughts, my private sensations, spoken back to me by something in the deep. A cold, oily streak of sweat crawled down my spine. My reality was fracturing. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like water. I looked at my hands, and for a terrifying second, I thought I saw something moving under the skin. Something long, thin, and pale, searching for an exit. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, just to feel something real. The taste of my own salt mixed with that copper. And then, the well began to laugh. I don't remember the drive to the motel. My mind is a blur of white lines on asphalt and the frantic rhythmic slapping of my windshield wipers. Even though it wasn't raining, I found myself in room 214 of the Copper Creek Inn. The air inside smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial bleach, a scent that usually grounded me, but now it felt like a shroud. My hands wouldn't stop. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, watching my fingers twitch against my thighs. They looked like independent creatures, pale, frantic spiders. I could taste it again. That copper, that old penny flavor, coating the back of my throat. I swallowed hard, but the lump in my neck felt like a jagged stone. I reached for the recorder. My movements were jerky, uncoordinated. I needed to hear the tape. I needed to know if the well had truly spoken my name, or if my mind had finally snapped under the weight of the Wyoming silence. I hit play. The hiss of the tape filled the room. I leaned forward, my elbows digging into my knees. My breath held so tight, my chest began to ache. For a long time, there was only the sound of the wind. Then, the sound of my own footsteps near the well, but they were too heavy. They sounded like boots, hitting meat instead of stone. Thud, squish, thud. A cold needle of ice traced its way down my spine. I reached out to stop the tape, but my arm felt like it was made of lead. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the door of my room. The gap at the bottom of the door was narrow, but I could see the hallway light bleeding through. And then, a shadow broke the light. Two dark, rectangular shapes. Feet. Someone was standing right outside, perfectly still. No breathing, no rustle of fabric, just presence. I felt a hot, stinging tear track through the grime on my cheek. I wanted to scream, but my vocal cords were paralyzed. My heart was a frantic drum, slamming against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. Then, the phone on the nightstand, an old beige rotary, began to ring. The sound was deafening in the small room. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. But the line clicked open anyway. The voice that came through the receiver wasn't mine, yet it used my vocal cords. It was a buzzing, distorted version of my own thoughts. "The copper is in your blood now, Thomas," it whispered. "Can you feel the hair growing behind your eyes?" I looked in the vanity mirror across the room. My reflection didn't move when I did. It stayed leaned forward, staring at me with pupils so dilated they looked like twin wells of ink. I watched in frozen horror as my reflection reached up and began to peel back its own bottom eyelid, revealing not flesh, but a flickering white television static. I was back at the well. I don't know how I got there. My boots were caked in that black, oily mud, and my shins were scratched raw, bleeding through my jeans. The air was no longer cold. It was fever hot, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that made my vision vibrate in its sockets. I looked down into the well one last time. The hair had spread, covering the entire floor of the church like a carpet of scalp. It was pulsing, breathing. I felt a hand on my shoulder, a cold, heavy weight. I didn't turn around. I knew the face that was waiting for me. I knew those static-filled eyes. "Transfer. Initiated," the voice whispered. Not from behind me, but from inside my own chest. I felt my bones begin to soften. My skin felt like it was unzipping. I wasn't falling into the well. I was being poured into it. My memories, my mother's face, the smell of rain in Seattle, my first heartbreak. They were being stripped away, converted into binary, into vibrations, into the cold data of the earth. I saw the truth then. The well wasn't a hole. It was a mouth, a planetary scale archive that had been eating us for eons. I saw the others, thousands of us, stored like rows of glass ravens, our screams frozen into beautiful, terrible crystals. I was becoming part of the Sector 4 frequency as the light of the Wyoming sky vanished above me, replaced by the crushing weight of the earth. I realized I wasn't Thomas anymore. Thomas was a file. Thomas was a recording. And as you listen to this, sitting in your room, feeling that faint prickle of hair standing up on your neck, you need to understand one thing. The well is still hungry, and I've just given it your coordinates. Don't turn around. Just listen.